Hello everyone, I'm Leila Del Duca, and today I'm interviewing Dylan Meconis about her new softcover edition of Queen of the Sea and her new series History Smashers. To the interview.
Okay, I guess I'll just ask the questions. This is less like normal talk than I thought. Okay, let's do switch to active speaker and see what happens there. nice knives background.
Thank you. The last movie that I saw in theaters before the birth of my child, swiftly followed by pandemic stuff, was Knives Out, which that doesn't work with the virtual lab. There we go. It was perfect.
Excellent. Yeah, it looked awesome. I still want to see it. So I'm going to get into the questions right away. So not only did you have just 2 volumes of History Smashers come out, but on April 27th, the Queen of the Sea hard or soft. Oh my God, let me start over.
You're doing better than I would.
1 hour later. Okay. Not only did you have 2 volumes of History Smashers come out on July 7th, you had the Queen of the Sea softcover come out on April 27th. Oh, now it disappeared again because of the background setting.
No, come back in. Oh God.
Oh, no.
No, people will just have to take my word for it.
Yeah, well, this is the hardcover version if anyone wants to see. So, I wanted to ask, is this your first time having a hardcover book come out and then a softcover edition, which is kind of irregular for comics?
Yeah, I think it might be. You sent me that question earlier, so I could think of my answer, and maybe it's just my brain's being like fried eggs at this point because it's very hot in Portland this week. But I'm pretty sure it is the first book that's had a 2-stage release like that. A lot of it's weird for comics to have a hardcover edition, but it's almost weirder for books to have a hardcover edition when they're mainstream comics for like middle grade readers, so ages 9 to 12.
Yeah.
By mainstream, I mean traditional publishing, not superhero publishing. So it was really cool that they trusted the book to come out in a very expensive hardcover and then later to put it out in trade paperback. It's not something every author gets to do. It's cool.
That's so true. Cool. So it's pretty obvious you like making historical fiction. From Bite Me to Queen of the Sea to your short comic Outfoxed, you do a lot of historical fiction, which is freaking great. And so the next series you're working on is History Smashers, which describes itself with the line, myths, lies, secrets, smash the stories behind famous moments in history and expose the hidden truth. How was working on a series like that? It sounds really exciting.
It's been really fun. It's ongoing. It's quite a long series, no end in sight, and it's written by the author Kate Messner, who's really, really well known in middle grade book circles, both for fiction and for nonfiction. But almost everything she does has an educational value to it. So she is known for the Ranger in Time series, which I'm a huge fan of because that's a time-traveling golden retriever.
Oh my God, how fun.
It's so wonderful because Ranger goes back to significant moments in history and helps rescue kids.
Oh, how sweet.
It's really awesome. It's a delightful series, and it's one of like 12 series that Kate writes. And History Smashers is kind of her first big nonfiction series. She's written individual volumes about things like snakes, how to save pythons, but this is her first nonfiction series. And she and her art director actually approached me about doing the illustrating because they had seen Bite Me, which is a book that I started doing in high school.
I know, and it's so cool to be interviewing you because I can mention here now that you were one of the cartoonists that inspired me back in the day when you had Bite Me online. When I was in high school and middle school, I was mainly just reading webcomics because it's all I could get my hands on, and your comic, Bite Me, was one of the ones I checked back almost every day, hoping beyond hope that there would be updates on. And now I share a studio space with you, and you get to inspire me again and again.
That's delightful. Yeah, for those who haven't read it, somehow, despite it being on the internet for literally almost 20 years now.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, horrifying, right? It is a very dumb vampire comedy set in the French Revolution. And this was in the vampire interregnum between Interview with the Vampire and Twilight, when vampires were like a niche, uncool thing, as opposed to a media juggernaut. So doing a French Revolution comic with vampires was definitely it was a deep take. It was a very deep
Yeah.
take. But yeah, I got to make a lot of guillotine jokes. But yeah, there's just like a lot of silly cartooning in there. And for the Kickstarter I did to publish a new print edition of Bite Me, I did a bunch of silly infographics featuring the Bite Me characters. And I think the art director, April Messner-Prieto at Penguin Random House, had seen some of those. And they're just like, look, here's a person who knows how to do visual communication in different styles and formats, and who can do cartooning or more serious illustration, so who could probably handle illustrating stuff for kids about different eras of history. And that was kind of an offer I didn't want to turn down. So I was like, the Ranger in Time writer wants me to do cartoons about history for children. That's my jam.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and they're so cool. They're such cool books. If I hadn't respected the history writing in them, I wouldn't have said yes. And I really respect them because they're intersectional. There's a lot there's a lot of history for kids that, even if it's like progressive or well-intentioned, doesn't talk about some of the really hard truths about people who we think of as heroes in history, especially if we're white or if we're male or if we're straight. And she does a really good job at being like, here's the thing, so-and-so did great stuff, but was also really racist, and racist in a way that wasn't normal at the time. Why would somebody behave this way? It's like she really goes into it, and I was really inspired by her radical honesty with a kid audience and trusting them to be able to understand, like, people are complicated and sometimes they do really bad things to each other.
Yeah, that's fantastic to hear. That's awesome.
Yeah, they're really cool.
Awesome. So next question. History Smashers features a variation of art from you. You're doing illustrations on some pages and then comics on others.
Yep.
I noticed you did a similar thing with Queen of the Sea, but with less prose in that book. Can you explain your thought process and why you made those storytelling decisions on both the Queen of the Sea and History Smashers?
Well, History Smashers, sort of the manuscripts that I receive already had a variety of stuff in there. So they knew they wanted somebody who could do both illustrations and comics and the occasional like silly infographic or, illustrate a map or something. So I think they kind of looked at my resume and they were like, aha, she can handle what we're thinking of. And she can also handle the relative creative freedom that was offered in those manuscripts. Like I just get very basic illustration briefs and very basic comic scripts, and I'm pretty much given free rein to interpret them how I want.
Fantastic.
Assuming they pass muster with any relevant cultural or sensitivity readers who are assigned to the book. I really get to do a lot of really original stuff that you normally don't get to do when you're just an illustrator for a nonfiction book. With
That's
Queen
true.
of the Sea, it was that was a personal choice because comics are so hard, Leila. And
Dylan, they are.
They're so hard and they're so long. And I've been working on my long-term graphic novel series, Family Man, for a long time. That it has a very, very rich illustration style and is very like moment to moment, like it's pretty cinematic in how it depicts action and time flowing. I was like, I would really like a book that's a little more cartoony, where I get to change what style I'm drawing in every so often, or just break and tell a fairy tale, or draw like a kid for a few pages, or just something to mix things up so it's not this endless march of 400 pages of panel.
Yeah,
panel.
exactly.
So yeah, it was totally me self-indulging my attention span.
Good.
I know that a lot of kids really like graphic novels, but part of the problem is that you read them so fast and then they're just, you'll reread them like 8 times, which is great, but sometimes, you want like a big chonker of a book, and most of the big chonker books are prose. So I was like, well, if I put some prose in there, and if I mix up the styles a lot, it kind of gives kids a lot of places to hang out or to go back to if they just want to like visit a scene in the book. They can be like, I just want to look at that chart about what the hours of the day are like.
That's perfect.
Yeah,
I love that.
Like what a 10-year-old Dylan really want to read. So I made that book. It's pretty cool.
All right, last question. What are some moments that stood out to you while working on History Bashers, The Mayflower, and also Women's Right to Vote?
Oh man, there were a lot. I learned a ton just from reading the manuscripts and then from doing the visual research. I have to do so much so much research for these books, and I really want to get stuff right because kids are reading this. And I mean, I can't get everything right. That's impossible. There are just too many questions about history that can't be solved by an artist who has to work very quickly and who can't currently go to the public library. But I learned so many things having, just being given a simple illustration brief and then having to go out and find out, okay, well, what would these people be wearing? What would the room that they're in look like? Oh, okay, we're talking about how these people make their food, so I'd better look up what species of food they were growing. Or in the case of the women's right to vote, I have to do a lot of research on what these people look like, or on things like, so sometimes when they incarcerated these women activists, they would force feed them. What kind of equipment did they use for that? So like some really intense stuff. And the title I'm working on now is about Pearl Harbor, and that has been super research intense because in the 18th century, stuff there was no industrial revolution, so things weren't as standardized. And with the women's right to vote, it's all about civilians who are, sort of dressed in civilian clothing. But with Pearl Harbor, there's so much technical detail. And there are 10-year-olds out there who are going to read these books and be like, actually, the Mitsubishi Zero was not in production until. So I've been very anxious about getting everything right, and just the depth of stuff that you pick up when you're just trying to figure out how to draw a teacup is really wild to me. So while I can't necessarily pull anything out of my brain at this exact moment, I know that at cocktail parties for the next 30 years, I'm going to be saying things like, oh, did you know Shirley Chisholm's favorite sandwich was peanut butter and jelly? And, just all this random stuff that I picked up from the manuscripts and the associated research.
Well, I know that I'm going to love hearing it over the lunch table if we ever get to meet in person again.
We will. I have faith. But yes, I'm sure you'll be subjected to many future episodes of Professor Dylan's Knowledge Minute, which is something that my studio mates all suffer through. Bless them.
Yes. Anyways, well, I think this concludes it. Thank you again for, trying to flip on. I'm hoping it records the way I did it, or I don't know. This might turn out terrible, but thank you again for joining me. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. Yeah. Any last words that we could edit in there after that awkward silence?
No, you have to leave the awkward silence in. Hang in there, everyone. We've got a lot of good books to read.
Thanks for joining me today. Now I'm going to read off of this because I'm impossible at memorizing things to say on camera. You can order copies of History Smashers, Queen of the Sea, and Dylan's other books, The Long Con, Family Man, Outfoxed, and Bite Me through her website at dylanmeconis.com. You can also see if your local comic book shop carries them or can order them for you. And as a last resort, there's always Amazon or other bookseller corporations. But also libraries. A lot of libraries carry Dylan's books. And if you'd like to be notified of future videos with tutorials and interviews and whatnot, please subscribe to Helioscope PDX, and we'll make sure to notify you of future videos. Thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.